Hello everyone, this is Taliesin McKnight. Thank you for joining me today. Today we will be looking at The Dream of Scipio. This is a book written by Cicero in the 1st century BC. So this work dates to the 1st century BC. And this was written by Marcus Tullius Cicero. He was a Roman philosopher, political theorist, and politician in the 1st century BC. Now this is interesting because it talks about the soul ascending up the 7 planets, going through the solar system to the Milky Way. As crazy as that sounds, and I'm not saying that it's true, I'm just saying this is what they believed. But it's interesting to find a theory like that back then. So Cicero, 1st century BC, he writes about, in his work, he talks about how the soul goes up the 7 planets like a ladder to the Milky Way, and how the soul descends through the 7 planets to the physical world. So that's interesting. And Macrobius, later in the 5th century, talks about the cosmic mind, the universal mind. So what's interesting here, for one thing, you have this planetary ideas, but also it shows that the idea of the cosmic mind, the universal mind, is a very ancient idea. In fact, a lot of our modern occultism is actually very ancient. Now, in the description box, I will post a link so that you could read this for yourself and draw your own conclusion. Cicero, this comes from Cicero, 1st century Roman philosopher. His work, De Republica, the Republic, this is a political treatise done in the form of a dialogue that comes in 6 books or volumes. Book 1 talks about the political situation of the time and the theory of constitutions. The 2nd book is an outline of Roman history and the development of the Constitution. The 3rd book talks about the role of justice in government and different types of constitutions in government. The 4th book is the role of education. The 5th book talks about the qualities of the ideal citizen in government. And the 6th book, the concluding book, is The Dream of Scipio, which we will be looking at today. The Dream of Scipio has Scipio Aemilianus, who was a Roman general. It's a myth, a story, that he goes and he has a dream. And in his dream, he sees his dead grandfather. And he leaves his body and goes to the stars. And his grandfather tells him that if he foretells his destiny, he tells his future, and he says that if he's a good citizen, a good soldier, and does his duty, then he will have eternal happiness in heaven. And it talks about a one God, the prime mover, the first cause. So you have an idea of reward for the righteous and a one God, the first cause. And you also have the idea that the body is a prison for the soul, and that the physical world is not important, the immortality of the soul is. So this is the 1st century BC. It predates Christianity, but it talks about a one God, reward of the righteous, and the importance of the soul over the body. And this is the 1st century BC. So it shows that these ideas were going around the Mediterranean with the upcoming of Christianity. Now, it talks about how the soul goes up the 7 spheres to the Milky Way, and how the soul descends through the Milky Way through the 7 planets. And it talks about the music of the spheres, how the different levels of heaven, the different levels of the planets have different tones or vibrational frequencies. Now, I know this is kind of out there, but it's just some Roman philosopher. This is what he came up with in the 1st century. But it does show the idea of layers of reality with vibrational frequencies, a planetary idea, kind of, and it also talks about some ideas you find in Christianity, such as a one God, a first cause, the reward of the righteous, and the importance of the soul over the body. So that's the dream of Scipio in the 1st century BC. Very interesting. Now we get to the commentary by Macrobius. Macrobius was a Roman philosopher that lived in the 5th century. So, this is about 600 years later. Macrobius has a commentary on Cicero's book. This is the commentary on the dream of Scipio by Macrobius. Macrobius Theodosius. He talks about below in the description box, I'll provide a link so you can read this with me. The commentary by Macrobius. Macrobius says, now this is a little later in the 5th century, according to Pythagoras, when the soul descends from the boundary where the zodiac and Milky Way meet the galaxy, from a spherical form, which is the only divine one, it is elongated into a conical one by its downward tendency. Just as the line is born from the point and proceeds into length out of the indivisible, so the soul from its point, that is monad, comes into dyad, its first production or lengthening. Now what does this mean? Macrobius is talking about the soul when it starts to come to earth and incarnate. That it begins as a point, the monad. And by its downward tendency, it forms a line, which is the dyad, 2. So from 1, 2. The monad refers to cosmic oneness, the cosmic mind, the universal mind, the universal soul is the point. The line, 2, the dyad, is separation. So you have a universal soul, and then you have an individual soul. You have a cosmic universal mind, and then you have individual minds. So it talks about the individualization and differentiation of the soul and its descent. So it's interesting. We're looking at some ancient ideas here. What did these people believe? It's important. Because, now why is this important? If you're an occultist, it is important because this is where occultism comes from. People try to act like the occult movement is all new to the 19th century. It's not. All of the ideas found in modern magic goes back thousands of years. A lot of the magic, ceremonial magic, like the Golden Dawn, Thelema, goes back to ancient times. Our modern occultism is not new. The New Age, the modern occultism, is very ancient, which is why this is important, partially. So out of a cosmic mind comes individualism. Out of the universal soul comes individual souls. Remember what I said with the point, the 1, and the line, 2, separation. Just as the line is born from the point and proceeds into length out of the indivisible, so the soul from its point, that is monad, comes into dyad, its first production or lengthening. And this is the essence which Plato in his Timaeus, speaking about the construction of the universal soul, this is Macrobius here, describes as indivisible and yet divisible. Now how is the universal soul divisible and invisible? It says here, Macrobius says, for just as the universal soul, the soul of the world, so also the soul of an individual is capable of division is not capable of division if it is regarded from the standpoint of simplicity of its divine nature, and in another capable of division, since the universal soul is diffused throughout the members of the world, and the individual soul is diffused throughout the members of the body of man. So you have the macrocosm and microcosm. You have the cosmic universal mind and the individual mind. Now Macrobius talks about the mysteries of Orpheus, the mysteries of Dionysus. And he says that the Greek god Dionysus was the cosmic mind. Now in the myth of Dionysus, he is torn into pieces. He's torn limb from limb by the Titans. This, Macrobius says, is the one universal mind being separated and divided into different parts. So you have the one cosmic mind divided and separated. Sorry about that, y'all. That was my roommate. Now, where am I getting this? So, the Greek god Dionysus is the cosmic universal mind that is divided into individual minds. How is it that today we regard Dionysus just a god of wine? People say that the Greek god Dionysus, just some pagan deity that we made up. It's an imaginary being. Ask a skeptic, what do you think about Dionysus? A skeptic will say, just some god the Greeks made up about wine and getting drunk. But the mysteries of Dionysus was a little deeper than just a god of wine. He was the universal cosmic mind, divided into individual minds. And the goal is to regain cosmic oneness, lose the ego, and unite with the all. And this is the ancient Greeks, according to Macrobius of the 5th century. Now here, and please read along with me, we're reading Macrobius from the 5th century. It says, the Orphic initiates suppose that Dionysus himself is the universal mind. Here we're reading Macrobius, which after its birth is itself divided into individual minds. That's some deep stuff, y'all. And it is for this reason, remember the myth, Dionysus is torn by the Titans limb from limb. They separate him. Kind of like the Egyptian god Osiris was hacked into 14 pieces by Set, division from unity. And it is for this reason that in their mystery tradition, Dionysus is represented as being torn limb from limb by the fury of the Titans. And after the pieces have been buried, as coming together again as whole and one. For the universal cosmic mind, by offering itself for division to form individual minds, from its undivided state, and by returning to its unity, both fulfills the duties of the cosmos and performs the mysteries of its own nature. So Macrobius is saying that the ancient pagans, the pagan initiates of the mystery schools, believed in universal mind and individual minds. Now today, in the occult movement, modern New Age people, today, a lot of New Age people, talk about the universal mind, the cosmic mind. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's just new. Something somebody modern just made up. These are not new. The cosmic mind is not a new idea. This is an ancient idea believed long time ago. Thousands of years ago, people believed in the cosmic mind, the universal mind, and cosmic oneness, things like that. Now, Macrobius talks about the soul descending from the Milky Way through the planets of the solar system towards Earth. I'm not saying this is real. I'm saying this is what they believed. So please don't misinterpret. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying this is what they believe. Macrobius says, the soul, therefore, having by means of this first weight of matter fallen down from the zodiac and the galaxy of the Milky Way into the series of spheres, the planets, that lie below them, in continuing its descent into matter, is not only enwrapped in an envelope of a luminous body of light, but also develops the separate motions to which it is to exercise. These are old pagan ideas, cosmic mind, the different planets. That is the 1st century BC dream of Scipio, and the 1st century BC dream of Scipio, written by Cicero. And also, we talked about the commentary of Macrobius in the 5th century, a little later, about 600 years later. So we have the dream of Scipio, written by Cicero in the 1st century BC, and then we have the later commentary of Macrobius.